Hey there, Grotto gamers, Donny here with another champion tutorial. Today we're going to be talking about Nami, the Tide Caller. Nami is a primary support champion. She's one of the healing champions. For the most part, she really doesn't play any other role other than support. When she was first launched back in the day, there was a lot of AP carry Namis, and it is still plausible at this day that you could build her really heavy AP. But for the most part, she's a fairly secured support champion, one of the primary healers. As always, what we're going to do is we're going to go through the champion's kit. I'll explain to you each of their abilities, what they do, tips and tricks on how to use them well, how to not use them well, how to max them up and in what order, and then we'll go through some item builds before we transition into runes, and then some live action of the champion. So let's get started. Nami's passive is called Surging Tides. When Nami's abilities hit allied champions, those allied champions gain a movement speed buff for 1.5 seconds. That includes yourself as well. So any heals or buffs that you give to your allies, or that you receive, perhaps maybe from a bounce on ebb and flow, would give a movement speed buff to yourself and your allied champions. Nami's Q is Aqua Prison. Nami sends a bubble to the targeted area, dealing damage to enemies in the area and stunning them for 1.5 seconds. Now, one of Nami's biggest tricks here is that she's able to use her Q, her Aqua Prison, very effectively to be able to control enemy targets, especially when she's bot laning with an ADC, where she's able to crowd control both of the opponents at once. I'm just going to give you an example of what Aqua Prison looks like. These are the targets here. We'll say, for example, all three of them are grouped together, pop an Aqua Prison, three of them get caught in a stun for a short period of time. It's really effective. It's a crazy stun. You can use it effectively. It is a little tricky to be able to land as a skill shot. I find one of the easiest things to do is to use your auto attack as a bait to pull in your target and then hit them with an Aqua Prism. Alright, let's move on to the next ability. Nami's W is called Ebb and Flow. And Nami's W, Ebb and Flow, is the bread and butter of her kit. Basically, it unleashes a stream of water that bounces back and forth between allied and visible enemy champions. On an allied hit, it heals them, and it'll bounce to the nearest visible enemy champion. And on an enemy hit, it damages them, and it bounces to the nearest allied champion. It bounces to each target only once, and hits up to 3 targets. The damage and healing value is modified by a percentage based on your level with each bounce. So it essentially is going to increase in potency as you've leveled it up as it's bounced. So the effective way to use Ebb and Flow is to try and get 3 bounces with each cast. And the way to do that is to prioritize exactly how you're casting it. What you don't want to do is just use it as a straight up heal. So like, let's just say I'm casting it on myself right now, or one of my allied. There's nothing that's going to happen effective with that because it hasn't bounced the 2 times that are left for it to be able to be maximized. So what you want to do is, let's just say, for example, that you or your ADC is in need of health. A good thing to do is to go up to your opponent and hit them with an Ebb and Flow, and it'll bounce from them to you or from them to your ADC. Let's just give you a brief example of what that looks like. In this first example, I'm going to cast Ebb and Flow on my partner. Ebb and Flow is going to go from them, bounce to the enemy, and over to another champion. Do that again. Heal, damage, heal. Heal, damage, heal. In the next example, I'm going to cast it on an enemy champion, and what it's going to do is it's going to bounce from the champion back to myself. We'll do it a little bit easier way here. There we go, there's a full bounce. So it goes from champion to me, back to champion. Champion to me, back to champion. Or champion to me, or champion to my ally, back to them. So that's a full 3 bounce. It's an effective way to make use of Ebb and Flow and make sure that you get the full max value out of it. The third ability, Nami's E, is called Tide Color Blessing. And what Tide Color Blessing does is it empowers an allied champion next basic 3 attacks, causing them to slow the target by 35% plus a percentage based on Nami's ability power for 1 second, and it deals bonus magic damage. This buff lasts for 6 seconds or 3 basic attacks. So it's good as a support character or support champion to use on your ADC to give them a little bit of a boost. It will trigger your passive, Surging Tides, which means for 1.5 seconds they get a boost to movement speed. So it can also be used for that purpose if you need to get in and out of combat quickly. But the big thing is that casting it on your ally or your ADC will allow them to be able to slow with their auto attacks, as well as to do a little bit of an additional bonus magic damage. I'll show you what that bonus magic damage looks like from myself. There's the slow that you can see. And there we are. Finally, Nami's ultimate is called Tidal Wave. And Tidal Wave summons a tidal wave from Nami's position. The wave knocks up enemies and slows them by 70%, dealing magic damage in the process. The duration of the slow is increased based on how far the tidal wave has traveled, with a minimum duration of 2 seconds and a maximum duration of 4. Allies that get hit by the wave gain double the effect from Surging Tide. So basically what Tidal Wave does is it sends out a big massive wave that travels across the board, not all the way across the board, just for roughly about 4 seconds max. And it slows enemy champions that get caught in it up to 70%. What it also does is it doubles the passive movement speed bonus of Surging Tides that you and your allies will get from getting caught in the tidal wave. Surging Tides is a nice little bonus. It's not really a great passive. The big benefit to it is when it's used in combination with Tidal Wave and you're going into a team fight or you're retreating from a team fight. Because what will happen is that you can use it when all of your enemy teams are chasing after, when all of you and your teammates are chasing after the enemy team. If it hits all of the enemy team members, each of them gets slowed by 70%, and all of your team that is running along with the wave get a speed buff that's doubled for 1.5 seconds. So it's a great way to slow the whole team and buff your whole team to catch up to initiate, or it's a great way to get out of a sticky situation when you're all trying to get back to your turrets. Alright, so that's pretty much it for Nami's abilities. For the most part, the effective way to use her abilities is to take a point in W right away, take a point in Q so that you have Aqua Prison, and then take a point in E so that you have all of your abilities. From then, I max out my W, then I max out my E, and I'll max out my Q. Aqua Prison gets maxed out last because really all we care about for the most part is just the stun. We don't so much care about the actual damage that it does, whereas Tide Color's Blessing is more of a big bonus that you can give to your ADC or the rest of the teammates, because the slow that gets finally totaled onto it when it's maxed is at 35%. So that's a nice little hefty slow on auto attacks for 3 auto attacks for your ADC or any of your team members that are trying to catch up to somebody. It's kind of like the Glacial Augment from the rune pages. Alright, next what we're going to do is we're going to go through Nami's item builds. There's a couple of ways that you can build Nami. Primarily what I like to do is I like to build her really defensively. So the first thing, as a support character, what I'm going to do is I'm always going to pick up that support item. It's going to be an Eye of Frost. Well, right now it's an Eye of Frost. I'll max it up to its max value. But yeah, it's going to be a Spell Thief. And what these support items do is it gives you additional gold per 10 seconds, because as a support champion, of course, we all know that you're at the bottom of the list when it comes to the economy. So you get the least amount of the gold because you don't get the CSs. Secondly, I like to pick up my Boots of Mobility. Now, Boots of Mobility can be offset or changed if you're not really a big fan of them. You can have them to Sorcerer's Shoes or the cooldown reduction boots. I specifically like to use the Boots of Mobility because I can traverse really quickly across the map, especially when I'm the only designated healer for the whole team. I want to be able to get around, get out of sticky situations really quickly, and plus I want to be able to get in and throw those Aqua Prisms to be able to stun the team members and get those ebb and flows in and out as quickly as I can. Especially when I'm using my Tidal Wave, you want to be able to have that double movement speed bonus from your passive. It stacks nicely with a Boots of Mobility. Thirdly, I'm going to grab an Ardent Sensor. Now, before I would have built my boots, after I grabbed my support item, the first thing I would have done is I would have grabbed the tier from the Archangel Staff. Only the tier itself, because I don't want to struggle with mana early game, and Nami's a really mana hungry champion early game. So I would have kept the tier, and then I would have started building the boots and Ardent Sensor. I'll grab a Ardent Sensor, in case you're not aware, is an item that gives you a passive that's almost exactly the same as Tidecollar's Blessing, and both of those stack. So Tidecollar's Blessing and Ardent Sensor stack. So whenever you heal or shield an ally, you and your ally gain 10 to 30% attack speed, and your attacks deal an additional magic damage. So if you healed with Ebb and Flow and you had Tidecollar's Blessing up on your ADC, for example, that would trigger your Ardent Sensor on both you and your ADC, and then your ADC would also get that buff from the Tidecollar's Blessing. So they would get attack speed bonus, and they would get a slow on their attack. So it's a nice little stack that comes with both of them. I'm going to build a Redemption after that. Ardent Sensor has a passive plus 10% heal power on it. Redemption also has a plus 10% heal power on it. 20% heal power might not seem like much, and realistically speaking, if you didn't stack healing items and you stacked AP items instead, your heals and your damage from Ebb and Flow would end up being more. The advantage to having all these healing items is that you don't have to worry about sacrificing the mana regen that comes with these healing items, and when you have plus healing power, like the 20% that comes with the Crucible, it's tripled on the Redemption heal. And what Redemption does is it gives you an active that allows you to throw out a heal to a group in this circle. And the really big advantage is that it has a crazy long range on it, so that it's got a 5,500 yard range on it, meaning that, and you can use it even after you've been killed. So let's just say, for example, we got into a team fight and I died and the team started moving up here. I could use Ardent Sensor all the way up here as long as they're within range of my corpse. Like, see how big that range is? Like, I'm all the way back here and the range ends up here. It's a huge circle. You can see it on the mini-map there. And again, like I said, the main advantage to stacking these healing items, when you get close to your 50% cap with your rune pages, you're going to be looking at 150% because Redemption triples the heal value from plus healing and shield power. That means then that I'm also going to grab the Crucible. The active on Crucible, again, is that it cleanses all stuns, roots, taunts, fears, silences, and slows on an allied champion and gives them immunity to slows for 2 seconds. It's a nice little advantage to be able to use in bot lane if you were still laning at this point. But if you were still laning at this point, you were up against a really high CC heavy support or ADC like Pyke or Morgana or Blitzcrank, you'd be able to use the Crucible to get your ADC out of a sticky situation. And then lastly, I've got a Seraph's Embrace, which is fully stacked after the tier is fully stacked. So this gives me the additional mana so that I'm not having to worry about that by late game. And it gives me ability power equal to 3% of my mana and refunds 25% of the mana that I spend. So it's a nice little ability there. Huge buff to the actual mana that you get from it. You get 1400 mana from it. Alright, so that's the basic healing build. If you want, there is also a way for you to build Nami AP heavy. I'll show you how to do that here. So we'll just sell these items. We'll sell a redemption. I'm going to keep the Ardent Sensor. I'm going to keep the boots. I'm going to get rid of the Crucible, and I'm going to get rid of the staff. What I'm going to do is grab a Death Cap, and I'm going to grab a Spellbinder, and I'm going to grab a Banshee Veil. The reason to grab a Banshee Veil, you could replace Banshee Veil with an Hourglass if you wanted to, but the reason you would grab that or an Hourglass is because now you're not healing heavy, now you're more AP heavy, so you need some sort of a buffer because Nami is an extremely squishy champion. She can get knocked out really easy. Like at max level here, I only have about 2,000 health. It's really easy to take her out, but she does a lot of healing and she supports very quickly. With this build, you have roughly about 600 ability power. When your Spellbinder is fully stacked, I'll just spam some spells here to try and stack it. When Spellbinder is fully stacked, and Spellbinder stacks up to 100, I believe, the bonus that you're going to get from that... Oh, another mana. The bonus that you're going to get from that is going to put your AAP close to the 800 region. And that makes your ebb and flow when it bounces 3 times, and then you get that additional 30% modified. By the third bounce, that if it's a damage bounce, it's going to be doing a huge chunk of damage. I'll illustrate that in just a moment here. So let's come up here. And I'll pop my Spellbinder, and we'll do an ebb and flow on Allied. See that final bounce is doing, say it goes 2, 3, 400 by that point. You throw in an additional Tide Colors Blessing, and it's doing a decent chunk of damage. Alright, so that's Nami's kit, and those are the builds for the most part. If you have any comments or questions about anything that you've seen in the first part of this video, feel free to comment in the YouTube comments. Or if you have any questions or comments about the channel, like, comment, and subscribe. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to go on to the runes that I use, and from there we're going to go into some clips of some live action with Nami actually playing with other players instead of in a training environment. Alright, so stick around and I'll be right back.